All right, classic case of not actually hitting the record button, so I had to re-record this. So here is my flight controller, Maytech, and I'm going to mount it. You saw I loaded ArduPilot on it. I'm going to mount it with the arrow facing forward, and that's how I did the accels. And the ESCs fit in there. And it looks like this length is fine for just sort of getting around there, so I think that'll be good. And then what I'm going to wire up to that is the UART for Walksnail. So this is this set of leads here. I think I'm going to put those into TX7 and RX7, apart from the power lead, which I'm going to stick into this VSW. I don't know if you can see the VSW pad at the top there, which allows you to switch the power on and off via a switch. So that's quite useful for this, which generates an awful lot of heat, I've discovered. I'm not super convinced that it won't get really hot while I'm sitting on the ground. So I think that will be that'll be a good option. So that'll be there. I'm also going to wire up tracer. So this is my tracer receiver, and I think it'll mount just down there, just like I did with the other one. Now tracer comes with a couple of these Mortal T antennas, and for this side that's just the right length, so it'll fit through there. That'd be nice. But for the other side, it's not, it's not nearly long enough, so this would be all the way up like this, which would just be a pain. But what I've done is I've also bought from TBS one of these extended Immortal T, so you can see they're a bit longer, and then that can sit on the other side. There's plenty of room there to go at either end and wire up to tracer. And then tracer comes with a cable set, so I will wire from the tracer outputs probably to TX6 and RX6, so those are the ones that are labelled as radio receiver, so I'll probably use those, and then once I've got those, put some heat shrink around it. And then finally the GPS. So the GPS sits in, so I'm going to either use this 3D printed GPS receiver that a friend did for me, it's nice and high quality, or I might try and print my own because it's a little bit loose in there. Let's see, not too bad though. And I'll run, this is the cable that came with the GPS, I'll run it under the antenna mount there along, and then the GPS connections here. You can just see along there it's got SCL, DA, and then UART connection, so that's the standard GPS location. So I think everything will run to the back there apart from the video power at the front, and I think that will be good. And I don't think there's anything else to wire up. I have wired up a buzzer in the past, but I just don't find a buzzer that I particularly like at the moment, so I think probably leave that out. An LED would be useful, since I don't have an LED on the this guy, but again, LED a little bit hard to know where to put that, so, and you need a kind of tiny LED. What I really want is a little button LED that I can just put on the side somewhere. I think that would be useful. I might see if people make that sort of thing. I don't think they do, but I might try it. So what I'll do is I'll cut these to length, and then show you them cut to length, and then get soldering. Thank you. Oh, just one other thing to show you. this is the piece of carbon fibre that I designed and cut yesterday on my CNC machine, and it worked out really well, so I'm really pleased with that. So I'll have to decide whether I actually decide to use that in the end rather than this one. I mean, this one seems okay, the way it's mounted, but yeah, really pleased with how that came out. That was a lot of fun. A lot of effort for a tiny piece, but at least it shows me how I can do it now. Alright, there we go. So if you don't like guessing, I can tell you how long I made these. So this cable from the plug to the GPS is 135 mil. The tracer leads are 60 mil, and then the Walksnail leads are 65 mil, and apart from the red one, which I've just left at the full length. And you can see that also I've detached the Walksnail antenna. Obviously you don't need to, if you want to just feed through the grommets that they provide, you can do it that way, it's much easier. But if you want to do it the way I've done it, then you'll need to attach something like that to here, and I've attached that now. You just undo a couple of these two bolts, this little flange lifts up, and then you can attach the UFL connector. So I need to get out my soldering iron and start wiring. Well, I'll strip the ends first, and then I get out my soldering iron and start wiring these up to the connectors. See how it looks. So the first thing I'll do is wire this up, and the challenge with this is you want to have everything wired before you put the heat shrink on. So what I'll probably do is attach the cable first. So what I quite like to do is attach this one running backwards, so you can see if I pop that on, I like it running backwards like that. So, and then this one running forwards. Like that, and then I'll solder the wires on, and then I can put the heat shrink on the outside, and it'll just keep it all nice and snug all together. There's enough flex in these so that if I decide to go through the bottom hole here, I can slip that through easily. But obviously, once the heat shrink is on, your options are a lot more limited. So I shall do that. Okay, so just a few notes on soldering. I know that people find this a bit daunting if you've never done it before, but actually it's dead easy. So the first thing is having something like this, these kind of grips, makes life so much easier, because it means you've got a third pair of hands. So I can put a little bit of solder on the end there. And this is the other thing it's worth doing. If you stripped wires, it's always worth putting a little bit of solder tinning the end, because not so much to make it stick better, but to stop the wires separating, because that can be a real pain. So the other thing to notice is, here's the tracer, and tracer, you can see that there's a square pad, and the others have got a half curve, so the square pad is the ground, so I can stick that in there. Now, usually with these it's easier to solder from this side to get to the solder to flow. and trying to solder it that way with a hand, without, and a hand on the soldering iron, a hand on the solder. Too many hands. So what I tend to do is you have to be a little bit careful here because you sort of can end up putting things in the wrong way, but I tend to just grab that. So I've put the wire, inserted the wire in the end there, and you can see it's sort of facing down, so I don't want it completely flat because I'm going to bend it the other way, and that means I can then turn that over and the wire is just peeking out, which means that I should be able to stick a little bit of solder in there when it heats up. There we go. And the other thing to notice is, so I've got a variable temperature soldering iron, which is great. For most connections, I think I usually do 380 degrees centigrade. I don't know what they say. Always a bit paranoid about desoldering things, but actually it's quite hard. These are I think done with lead-free solder now, so it's got quite a high melting point. So so you don't need to be that worried. But what you find is that the ground connections are a lot harder to solder than the rest of the connections. So I tend to up the temperature a little bit just for the ground, just to get the solder to flow freely. And you can see with that solder in there, that's nicely gone in there, and I'll just do the same with the rest. So just a few tips on soldering there. Get a third pair of hands, much easier. Also, don't do what I'm doing here, which is soldering over the components. Nothing worse than dropping a little dab of solder into one of the motors or into parts here. That's a great way to create a short and get everything not working very well. So I will remove, I don't need the drone there for the moment. I've got all the bits that I need to solder separately for now, because this little plug comes off from the Walksnail. So I shall tin all of those ends and then solder them up using my third pair of hands. Alright, nearly done. I've done the GPS. I've put the tracer wires on here. I'm going to do this last because the tracer wires are going to go in there. I've got a piece of heat shrink on there. Just going to shrink that up. I use this is a little gas pad heater, which is great because it's really accurate. Very small thing. You can see it heats up nicely, and that's brilliant for just getting really accurate heat shrinking done. Really good. Got bits of plastic melting on it, that's what's smoking. So that's nearly done. It's not quite enough, but yeah, and then I'll solder these on that. Alright, and there we go. So you can see I've got the heat shrink on, I've put the tracer on there, got the GPS on there, I've got the UART for Walksnail on there, and then I've got the switched video on there. So what I'm going to do is connect up the GPS, and so these are all running on the 4v5 supply, which means they should get power when the USB is plugged in. So on these boards the 5 volt is not powered unless the battery's on, can supply a greater current, but the other ones will get power with the USB on. So I'm just going to plug that in there, and you can see you get power on tracer and power on the GPS. So that's all good. So just a reminder, always with these things you should connect TX to RX, RX to TX. So TX from the GPS goes to RX on the flight controller, RX on the GPS goes to TX on the flight controller. On tracer they just say channel 1, channel 2. It doesn't actually matter because you are able to switch these in the software setup for tracer. And what I'm going to do is, with this powered up, I'm just going to check that I have the right things configured and just make sure everything is communicating effectively. So I'll switch to the other display. Alright, so got Mission Planner here, and so what I'm interested in is the serial ports. So let's just bring this to the front so that you can see that. Oops, move that one back. There we go, okay. So I just move that to the back for now. So we're looking at the serial ports in the search bar. Okay, serial star protocol. Okay, so here's the protocol, and what I want to know is I want to make sure they've got the right protocol for the right board, and what I can do is consult the Maytech manual off screen. And if you remember, I had, oh, Maytech being very slow website. So I had UR6, TX6, TXRX6, which is serial 7 configured as RCN, and RCN, so the default is correct there, so 23 is RCN. I think that's the default. Well, I think that's what's set. Okay, so then UART 8 I don't think I used, so I'm going to disable UART 8. And then the TX7 RX7 is the Walksnail, so that's serial 1. So serial 1 I'm going to set to display, I think it's display port, I think that's the correct one. I want to say, I think display port is correct, it's not DJI FPV. And then the GPS was, I'll just check on the wiring on here. The GPS was TX2 RX2. So TX2 RX2 is serial 3. So serial 3 is GPS, that's set to GPS. Serial 4 not using, so I'm going to disable that. And serial 2, I'll leave that set to modeling, that's fine. Alright, so I'll write out those parameters. So actually everything was set correctly. So what I need to now try and do is see whether I can get a radio signal. So I'm gonna pause, find my radio controller and see what we can find. Right, so you can see this is flashing. I think that's in bind mode. So I don't know, this that seems visible. So I'm going to go to Agent Light. I go to Micro TX and click bind. Bind. There we go, and its binding is okay. So you can see the light's gone solid. Whoops. Don't know why I did that. Seem to have unbound it. Wasn't that clever.
Telemetry lost. Telemetry recovered.
Okay, so it is bound now. Okay, so right now, if I go back here, so if I do Agent Light, there we go, Tracer RX has appeared. And what I want to check is the output map. So well, I'll do general first. So general, I want 12 channel. Failsafe mode cut is fine. RC by Navlink I don't want because I'm going to do RC over the UART. I don't want the battery sensor because that creates all sorts of problems. Alright, and then the output map. Now by the magic of TBS, it seems to have guessed the output one CRSF, TX and RX. So somehow it's managed to figure that out. So my guess is that that is now working correctly. So I think what I might do is come out of that and then repower. Let's see what happens. And there we go. Now, I've got Yapu on here. The reason that's not producing data is because I need to set an additional telemetry setting. So I'm just going to switch back to the computer. Alright, so we are here now. So if I go to RC options, and I'm going to enable pass through with CRS telemetry. So 288 is the magic number. Right, those parameters. Oops, need to be connected first. So RC options 288. Right, those parameters. And I think one of the questions is radio calibration doesn't look like it's working correctly at the moment. So I need to figure out why that is. So yeah, clearly CRSF thinks it's connected, but ArduPilot does not. So probably the first thing I'm going to try is just flipping the order of CRSF, TX and RX just in case that's the wrong way around. So if I flip back there. Okay. Agent Light. There's the RX. Output map. So let's set this to Doesn't seem to want to let me do that. Alright, so I will have to investigate that a little bit. Seems a little bit strange that I've had this issue before. Okay, seems a little bit strange. Investigation required. Alright, so I solved it. A little bit weird though. Let me show you. Okay, so what I had to do in serial 7, I had to swap TX and RX pins around. So clearly there is an order for CRSF. I don't know why I wasn't able to switch the pins in Agent Light. Seems a bit weird, but I switched these around, and so this is just option 8. You set bit mask, it'll say there's a swap TX RX, and I go set up. Now I have RC control, so that is good. And I think the final thing to check is, do I have, looks like the GPS. Yeah, it looks like the GPS is communicating, so that's good. I think if I go to the data here and messages, not saying GPS there, but I think it's fine. And I'll just check that the compass is right. It's detected the compass, so that's good. So everything is working well. I'm not too bothered about the Walksnail at the moment. I'll probably leave that for a later date, but I think as far as these connections are good, I'm good to go. So that is the end of the sort of electronics wiring piece, and the next piece is to assemble all the bits into the copter. Thanks for watching.